Hello guys. I've made videos before with help and guidance for people looking to improve their games in Freelance, but it's mostly been basic stuff aimed at people who are relatively new or less experienced. For those wanting to grind to EVP 999, the advice in those videos doesn't quite hit the mark, and things change a bit in Freelance the higher up you go. There's a bit more nuance to the game, and smaller things can be indicative of bigger differences between wins and losses. So here's 7 things I can recommend that might help you if you're looking to improve in Freelance in Salmon at higher difficulties. For the basis of this video, I will mention here that higher EVP will be inclusive of EVP 600 and higher. There are some differences between EVP 600 and HLM games, but for the most part, everything that works for EVP 600 will generally work for games at HLM 2 and vice versa. If there are any differences, I will mention them. I also just want to add that all the footage in this video is me playing in Freelance only, just to demonstrate the points I'm making. Number 1. Objective. It goes without saying that delivering eggs is a lot easier when you have slayed all the enemies around you, but more often than not, you'll have to learn how to effectively manage both at the same time. The pressure in higher difficulty lobbies can be intense, especially if you're not used to it, so you might find yourself neglecting egg delivery for boss slaying, or sometimes you'll find your teammates aren't helping with boss slaying and are just consumed by their egg greed. Either way, you'll need to do both and you can't neglect one too much. Sometimes you'll end up in lobbies where your teammates can manage the enemies well, but nobody is running eggs. Or sometimes you'll be the only person defeating enemies and your teammates will only run eggs. The key here is to notice what objective you need to do. Oftentimes you'll play entire games where you barely run any eggs and defeat 45 bosses, but the important thing to recognise is whether the egg delivery is happening. Can you bring bosses closer to the basket so you have some time to run eggs? Are you the closest person to the stinger that's just spawned on a different side of the map that your teammates are on? Can you use egg throw to stun enemies, revive teammates, or kill lessers? Can you leave those eggs at the basket for 5 seconds so you can kill a stillhead that everybody else is ignoring? Time management is essential in higher EVP lobbies, and being able to do several things at once without tunnel visioning one objective is one of the best skills to fine-tune. There are games where you'll end up having a disparity between power eggs and golden eggs, but it is a team game. If someone on your team is running eggs by basket, you don't need to be with them all the time. Think about running some fart eggs or controlling the lessers around the basket to reduce the pressure for them. Keep an eye on the time, assess what objective takes priority, and consider switching objective if the situation changes. Number 2. Staying alive. Staying alive and reducing the amount of deaths you have in-game is one of the biggest things you can do to guarantee more victories. Now, I'm not saying you can't ever die. Weird things happen in this game and you will just suffer at some points. But you'll need to start managing the way you play so you can make strict judgment calls. For example, will going out for that one static boss likely end with you dying? And if so, will your teammates be able to stop what they're doing to revive you? Or will they be able to cope with the pressure of having a player down? Weighing up the pros and cons of going to take down a fast static that's surrounded by lessers and lurable bosses while you have a weapon that might not be able to cope with the pressure is decision making you'll need to start applying in your games and recognising when to do so. The more you die, the more you're inactive and the more pressure you're giving to your teammates. Let's say that when you die, you're down for around 7 to 10 seconds. What could you have done in that time had you not died? The closer the timer ticks down to 0, the more disastrous your death could be. It could be the difference between a wipe or just not making quota. It's important to also mention that panicking and burning specials or running into a death trap doesn't often work out, so recognising when you need to move back and play defensively is important too. Finally, don't overstay your welcome at a big shot cannon in an attempt to get more eggs if quota is looking okay. Sometimes your death at a far boss is the catalyst for all your teammates going down one by one, and you'll kick yourself for doing it. Number 3, ink management. I speak more about splat bombs and ink management in a dedicated video, but I just wanted to mention it here. A good player in Salmon is always proactive with their time and their objectives and can productively do several things at once. Ink management is a huge part of this. Knowing when to find the time to recover ink for your main weapon or for a splat bomb is very important and ensures you don't find yourself running out of ink often. Combining recovering ink with other objectives, say most likely running eggs, is a way to maximize 2 objectives at once, especially if you have a slow weapon that takes longer to fully recover ink. Combine that with tracking the incoming bosses, the time remaining, and making sure quota is being met, and you're ensuring that all your downtime recovering ink isn't actually downtime. It's productivity, multitasking, and maximizing the most out of the time. Number 4, weapon rolls. Weapon rolls are a complex topic that deserve their own video, and the weapon guides I do touch on this, but I wanted to briefly mention this because it's important to understand the weapons you're given. Weapons are split into different classes, and this affects their movement, their ink efficiency, and damage per second. It's good to start recognizing what your weapon is good at and what it's not so good at. For example, the Dapple Julies have one of the highest DPS in the entire game when compared to other weapons, yet they have such short range that you will have to put yourself in riskier situations to achieve those tasks. Whereas a 96 gal can stand back, create space and preserve its own safety, the Dapples are forced to be up close and in the thick of it all. This is a judgment call you're forced to make when going out for static bosses, or if you're forced to take on bosses that aren't best suited for your weapon. All weapons can defeat all bosses, but it's about recognizing what your weapon does quickly and efficiently, and knowing the risks of the task you're about to undertake. Do not overestimate or underestimate the weapon you have. You'll likely end up dead or just wasting time. You can't be everywhere all at once, so sometimes you won't be where you're needed, but if you're fulfilling another task, then it usually doesn't matter so much. Be mindful of the weapon you have and how it works with the other weapons your teammates have. Another example of this is if you're the best painter on the team, do not ignore that. Number 5, specials. If you want to consistently pass waves at higher difficulties, you'll need to start becoming aware of optimal times to use specials. At higher difficulties and HLM, they're not panic buttons, but tools to ensure you survive and keep up pace with the incoming boss spawns. Specials, to me, are the thing I see most freelancers fail at optimizing. It is usually the most glaringly obvious play that tells me they're not used to higher difficulties or they're relatively inexperienced in freelance. Of course, we're all guilty of using specials badly or not at all, but I want you to start approaching the use of specials as tools specifically equipped to help you win games. For the context of this video and freelance, specials, in my opinion, should serve 2 main purposes. Ensure your safety and the clearing of an area or cluster of spawns that will impact the game negatively. It doesn't matter what wave it is. You'll need to start recognizing when using your specials will achieve both of these tasks. Specials can and should be used when you're in a situation that you feel is unwinnable or if you feel like too much time is wasted. An example of this is several flyfish and stingers spawning. An inkjet, tri-strike, killer whale or crab tank would defeat these bosses substantially quicker than doing it manually. Rather than going down there, risking your safety, using time, you can eliminate the majority of the threat quickly. Someone has to do this. Ignoring these spawns will not end well most of the time. If you die, what happens next? It doesn't matter if you wipe in wave 3 after using both specials in previous waves. You can leave the lobby, find new freelancers, and be happy in the knowledge that you threw everything you had at the enemies. Losses are to be expected and are part of the learning curve. But if you can pinpoint the moment you should have used a special before things spiraled, then you know what to do next time to be closer to the victory. Lastly, specials used late are often ineffective and don't fully maximise their true potential. It's rare that a special used hastily resolves a snowball. If you have a special that takes time to use or potentially leaves you vulnerable, think crab, inkjet or whale, then it's often pointless using them late. You're better off using the time you have left to either run eggs, survive, or use your main weapon. Number 6. Lessers. Lessers are the be and end all of silly deaths, restricted movement and lack of turf. At higher hazards, they spawn in larger clusters and cohocks are more frequent. They need to be managed as a team and be part of the multitasking you do when playing the game. Even if you hit partial damage on cohocks, just so your teammates with weaker or slower weapons can take care of them quickly, you are positively impacting the entire game, making it easier for everybody. In Freelance, nobody seems to be willing to take on the task of controlling lessers, even when they have the most appropriate weapon or special for it, but I want to strongly advocate for you to do it, especially if you find your teammates are doing other things, such as boss slaying or running eggs. It's also important to recognise that managing lessers is a task that is never ending, as they continue to spawn from the start of a wave up until the very last second. It varies slightly depending on the hazard, but bosses stop spawning after a certain time, meaning that after that time has been reached, only lessers will spawn. Every choice you make, every type of play, and every attempt at fulfilling an objective will be met with lessers attempting to make your decisions difficult. There are games where my eggs ran are lower than my teammates, and my bosses killed a fewer too, yet I end up with the most power eggs obtained. You'd be surprised how quickly you rack up power eggs just from lessers alone. Do not neglect lessers in the scope of the entire game. They will slow you down and eventually kill you if you're not managing them effectively. Number 7. Adaptability. Lastly, I just want to briefly touch on adaptability in Freelance. Because there's no communication or no understanding of what skill level your teammates are playing at, you'll often have to notice small clues in the way they're playing to maximise what can be done within a team. Sometimes you'll notice that the weapon you're given isn't really suited to the way you're being forced to play. You know statics need to be taken care of, but your teammates with more appropriate weapons are just camping the basket and running eggs instead of helping. Unfortunately, this is something you'll need to work around and force yourself to get used to, especially as the difficulty increases. Regardless of what weapon you have, you'll need to do your part and flex to the role that's needed in the moment. Weapon roles, as discussed, are important, and it's good to recognise the strength of your weapon and what it does better than all other weapons, but limiting yourself to only doing certain things in a game will only prevent you from achieving the most you can. Don't look at bosses and go, why isn't my teammate going for them? Look at bosses and think, how can I take this boss out so it doesn't cause problems in the future? This is so important at HLM, as even a fish stick at the basket area will drastically reduce the chances of being able to run eggs or survive amongst other more deadlier enemies. Be proactive. Look to see what objective needs doing regardless of what weapon you have. Sometimes this will be the difference between a win and a loss. Thank you for watching, and of course there are things I haven't spoken about, but I hope I have covered some crucial points that help you reflect on your gameplay. Let me know what you think. I'll see you soon.
응, 됐다.